This is a reaction video to the video by FAULTLINE Economics entitled Argentina's Collapse, Milei's 100-Year Gamble. This video is not only economic pseudoscience, it's slander, and it's hard to believe that it wasn't sponsored by the deep state cabal or some central bank.
Argentina's new president just made the biggest economic gamble in a generation.
So according to this guy, balancing the budget, cutting taxes, cutting regulations, lowering inflation, reducing the number of government parasites, employees, not counterfeiting, not printing money, is an economic gamble of historic proportions. Only Keynesian trash or central bankers could make such an absurd argument.
Javier Milei is deliberately pushing 55% of the population into poverty.
Not only is this wrong, but it's clear slander. This guy says that Milei is purposely pushing 55% of the population into poverty. The reality, of course, is that when the Kukas were in charge, they quit counting the poverty rate because they thought it was demeaning to people. Milei has reduced the poverty rate from the honest 57% under the Kukas to below 30%, taking 10 million people out of poverty. The fact that this guy ascribes intent to put people into poverty means that this guy is a slanderous scum.
Firing tens of thousands of public workers and slashing government spending.
This idiot doesn't understand that the government does not produce anything. Government employees are a drag on the economy. Only a Keynesian who believes in perpetual motion machines believes that government spending and government employees increase the GDP.
By 30%, all betting he can break a century-old cycle of collapse that has defeated every leader before him. Think about the stakes here. Argentina has defaulted on its sovereign debt 9 times.
Argentina has defaulted on its debt 9 times, and yet this guy thinks that it's a huge gamble to balance the budget?
9 times. The country that was once richer than most of Europe now has triple-digit inflation and a currency nobody trusts. Milei's shock therapy is either the radical cure Argentina desperately needs, or it's about to trigger the 10th default and social chaos worse than the 2001 collapse when 5 presidents fell in 2 weeks.
So balancing the budget and cutting government spending is going to trigger the 10th default for Argentina? How does this make any sense? This is just insanity.
But here's what makes this gamble truly extraordinary. Milei isn't just fighting economics, he's fighting Argentina's deepest political pathology. A system so broken that crisis has become the norm, not the exception. And the clock is already ticking against him. I'm James Whitfield from FAULTLINE Economics. While others chase headlines, we examine the systems that actually shape history, geography, demographics, and economic fundamentals. Today, we're analyzing Argentina's perpetual crisis machine. This is strategic clarity in a complex world. Let's set the stage. In 1900, Argentina was richer than most of Europe. Its GDP per capita rivaled Britain and exceeded Spain's by more than double. Buenos Aires was called the Paris of South America. Fast forward to today, the country has experienced triple-digit inflation. The peso has lost 99% of its value against the dollar in just 5 years, and over 55% of the population fell into poverty during the recent adjustment.
That 55% happened before Milei took office. That was when the numbers were counted honestly. The Kukas had quit counting poverty because they thought it was demeaning to people. But when the numbers were looked at honestly, the poverty rate was 57% when Javier Milei took office and has fallen to below 30% now. Why does this guy not state anything honestly? This is a clear smear job.
But why do you call them shit?
Because they are shit.
This isn't a temporary setback. It's a chronic condition. Since the military coup of 1930 ended 7 decades of constitutional rule, Argentina has swung back and forth between populist overspending and harsh austerity, between state control and market chaos. The result? A country that's been in recession for 20 of the last 50 years. Let me show you exactly what I mean. Factor 1. The fiscal death spiral. Argentina has run a fiscal deficit in 57 of the last 65 years.
He says this, and then he says it's a big gamble that Milei balanced the budget in the very first month that he took office. The GDP then grew 6% in 2024 and is growing at over 7% in the year 2025. The poverty rate has fallen below 30% and 10 million people have been taken out of poverty. That's the big gamble.
This isn't just overspending, it's a structural addiction to living beyond its mean. When international markets are open, governments borrow in dollars. When they're closed, which happens every decade or so, the central bank simply prints pesos to cover the gap. This creates what economists call fiscal dominance, when government spending needs dictate all monetary policy. The debt crisis of the 1980s shows this trap clearly. The military government borrowed $45 billion, then defaulted in 1982. With no access to credit, they printed money, which triggered the 1989 hyperinflation when prices rose by more than 5,000% in a single year. That trauma permanently destroyed faith in the peso. Factor 2. The commodity curse. Now, here's where it gets interesting. Argentina controls some of the world's most fertile agricultural land. The pampas produce enough food to feed 400 million people. The country is the world's 3rd largest soybean exporter and holds 20% of global lithium reserves. This should be a blessing, but it's actually a curse. Over 80% of Argentina's soy production goes to export, making government revenues directly dependent on volatile global commodity prices. When China sneezes, Argentina catches pneumonia. During commodity booms, dollars flood in, the peso strengthens, and the government spends like there's no tomorrow. When prices crash, and they always do, the economy collapses. This cycle has repeated itself 5 times since 1975. Factor 3. The currency psychology. This brings us to the most devastating factor. Argentines don't trust their own currency. After decades of devaluations and confiscations, including the 2001 Corralito, when the government froze all bank accounts, there's a deep cultural preference for US dollars. Economists estimate Argentines hold over 200 billion in cash dollars, mostly hidden in safety deposit boxes or literally under mattresses. That's half of GDP sitting idle, not invested, not productive. Every time there's uncertainty, people rush to convert pesos to dollars, draining central bank reserves and creating the very crisis they feared. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy of collapse. If you find this analysis valuable, subscribe to FAULTLINE Economics. We dive deep like this every week. Factor 4. The Peronist legacy. But all of this is amplified by Argentina's unique political disease, Peronism.
Why would he show a picture of Javier Milei when he's talking about Peronism? Peronism is the opposite of what Milei is implementing. This is dishonest.
Since the 1940s, this populist model has built a state where powerful unions, business lobbies, and social movements negotiate directly with the government for benefits. In 2022, over half the population received some form of government transfer. The unions alone can paralyze the country. 40% of formal workers are unionized, the highest in Latin America. They've successfully blocked every major reform attempt for 3 decades. This creates massive rigidities. Businesses avoid hiring because labor laws make firing nearly impossible, pushing 46% of workers into the informal economy where they have no protections at all.
He doesn't mention that Milei has freed up the labor laws, allowing more people to be employed in the formal sector. He also doesn't mention that Milei has eliminated rent controls. The number of apartments on the market expanded rapidly, and the price of rents actually fell.
But all of this hinges on one deciding factor: political consensus. Argentina hasn't had a coherent economic policy lasting more than one presidential term since 1930. Every government reverses the previous one's reforms. Market liberalization is followed by state control, followed by liberalization again. This policy whiplash makes long-term planning impossible and destroys investor confidence permanently. Now, let's connect the dots. What do you think is the most critical challenge for Milei's shock therapy? Can he break the cycle, or will social pressure force another reversal? Drop your analysis in the comments. I read every strategic insight you share. Here's what they won't tell you. Argentina is already negotiating its 24th IMF program since 1956. The fund has created a moral hazard. Governments know they'll eventually get bailed out, so they delay reforms until crisis forces their hand. The 2018 program was the largest in IMF history at $57 billion, and it failed catastrophically, financing capital flight instead of stability. For a masterful deep dive into how sovereign debt crises unfold and why countries default repeatedly, I recommend Default by Gregory Makoff and Lee Buchheit on Audible. It's an eye-opening analysis of the mechanics behind sovereign debt crises. Get your free trial with the link below. This analysis connects directly to our breakdown of China's role in Latin American commodities. You can find that breakdown in the card on screen and linked in the description. It reveals another piece of this strategic puzzle. So what does this mean for Argentina's future? If current trends continue, by 2050 we're looking at one of 2 scenarios. Either Milei's shock therapy succeeds, inflation stabilizes permanently, and Argentina leverages its lithium reserves to become a critical player in the global energy transition. Or, and history suggests this is more likely, the social cost proves unbearable, triggering another default by 2027, accelerating brain drain as educated Argentines flee.
The social cost of reducing inflation from hyperinflation around 2,000% plus down to 20% levels, and soon they'll be down to 0%. The cost of taking 10 million people out of poverty. The cost of 6 to 8% GDP growth. What is this guy talking about?
And locking the country into permanent middle-income mediocrity while its neighbors prosper. The future isn't written, but the blueprint is there for those who know how to read it. Argentina's crisis isn't about bad luck or external shocks. It's about a political system that rewards short-term populism over long-term stability.
Again, he puts up a picture of Milei while he's talking about populism. Milei is doing the exact opposite. In fact, Milei has talked about the calculus of populism as the Pareto principle. This is just dishonest and fraudulent and slander.
Mr. Madison, what you just said is one of the most insanely idiotic things I have ever heard. At no point in your rambling, incoherent response were you even close to anything that could be considered a rational thought. Everyone in this room is now dumber for having listened to it. I award you no points, and may God have mercy on your soul.
Okay, a simple wrong would have done just fine, but
You remain one